In the year 2498, humanity had spread its influence across the stars. Their technology had advanced far beyond what any of their ancestors had ever dreamed possible. They had encountered many species, some peaceful, others hostile, and some even more strange than the human imagination could fathom. But there was one thing humanity had not anticipated: the discovery of an alien civilization on the brink of extinction. The planet Olaris had been a thriving hub of innovation and culture for centuries, its towering cities and lush landscapes a testament to the intelligence and creativity of its inhabitants. The Olarians were a species that valued knowledge above all else, their society built on the pillars of science and philosophy. However, centuries of internal conflict, environmental degradation, and a long-forgotten war had ravaged their world. Their population dwindled to a fraction of what it had once been, and their once great cities now stood in ruins. The Olarians had reached a point where they were no longer capable of sustaining their own civilization, and they were preparing to face their inevitable demise. Humanity had arrived on Olaris as part of an exploration mission, a routine scan of nearby star systems. What they found shocked them to their core. The Olarians were not just a dying species, they were a species with knowledge that could elevate humanity to unimaginable heights. Their technology, while ancient and seemingly primitive, held secrets that could revolutionize the way humans traveled the galaxy, harnessed energy, and even interacted with life itself. The first encounter with the Olarians was not one of peaceful communication. The humans had landed on the outskirts of what remained of Olarian civilization, their advanced technology causing tremors that echoed through the ruined streets. The Olarians, desperate and fearful, viewed the humans with suspicion and hostility. They had seen the collapse of their own society and were unwilling to trust any outsiders, let alone a species that had never before encountered their kind. Captain Sarah Whitaker, leader of the human expedition, knew that diplomacy was their only option. She understood the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences of failure. The fate of an entire civilization rested on their shoulders. Sarah, along with a small team of scientists and diplomats, ventured into the heart of Olaris' capital city, hoping to make contact with the Olarian leaders. The city was eerily quiet, the once bustling streets now empty, save for the occasional flicker of a broken hollow sign or the distant hum of malfunctioning machinery. As they approached the central government building, they were met by a group of Olarian guards, their expressions hard and unyielding. The humans knew they had to be careful, as one wrong move could trigger a violent conflict. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, speaking in the universal language that had been established for interspecies communication. She introduced herself and her team, explaining their peaceful intentions and offering their help to save the Olarian people. The Olarians, still wary, did not respond immediately. Instead, they took Sarah and her team to the council chamber, where the last surviving members of the Olarian leadership were gathered. The council chamber was dimly lit, the air heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of history. The Olarian leaders, their faces gaunt and weary, watched the humans with suspicion, as if uncertain whether to welcome them or to see them as yet another threat to their already fragile existence. It was in this moment that Sarah realized the true challenge they faced. The Olarians had lost hope, and in doing so, they had lost the will to fight for their own survival. The council members listened in silence as Sarah spoke, outlining the resources and technologies that humanity could provide to help the Olarians rebuild. She promised them knowledge, aid, and a chance to regain what they had lost. But even as she spoke, she saw the doubt in their eyes. Would they accept the help of an outsider, or would their pride and fear of further suffering keep them from taking the hand offered? It was at that moment that a voice echoed through the chamber. A young Olarian, barely an adult by their species standards, stepped forward. She was not a member of the council, but her presence was enough to catch everyone's attention. Her name was Lyra, and she had not been alive during the height of Olarian civilization, but she had learned the stories from her elders. She knew the greatness that her people had once achieved, and she refused to let it die. Lyra spoke with a fierce determination, calling for her people to trust the humans and accept their offer. She argued that without hope, there could be no future. The room fell into silence once more, the council members exchanging glances. After what felt like an eternity, the eldest of them all, a frail and weathered Olarian known as Chancellor Tellon, nodded slowly. It was the first sign of agreement. With that gesture, the fate of the Olarians had been set in motion. Humanity would help, but it would be up to the Olarians to decide whether they were willing to rise from the ashes or let their civilization fade into history. The humans had come to offer salvation, but the real question was whether the Olarians would accept it. The fate of both civilizations hung in the balance. The first step toward saving Olaris was to establish trust, and that proved to be more challenging than anyone had anticipated. The humans, led by Captain Sarah Whitaker, worked tirelessly to understand Olarian culture and history, delving into ancient records and long-forgotten archives that the Olarians themselves had abandoned. The data they uncovered revealed a civilization rich in scientific knowledge but tragically fractured by centuries of war and internal strife. Despite their advanced technologies, the Olarians had been unable to heal their world or their hearts. The Olarians, though initially hesitant, began to show signs of cautious optimism. Under Sarah's leadership, the humans set about restoring the most critical systems: water purification, food production, and energy generation. They had brought advanced technologies, and their efforts were already bearing fruit. The planet's devastated infrastructure began to hum with life once more. However, this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in restoring the Olarian people's belief in themselves. Their morale had been shattered, and the deep scars of their past weighed heavily on their shoulders. Many Olarians had long given up on the idea of a future, resigned to the belief that their species was doomed. The Council, while grateful for the assistance, remained divided on how far they should go in accepting humanity's help. Some feared that relying on outsiders would only lead to further subjugation, while others saw it as their only hope for survival. Lyra, the young Olarian who had stood up in the council chamber, became an unexpected beacon of hope for her people. Her passion and determination were contagious, and she began organizing grassroots efforts to rebuild her society. She traveled from city to city, speaking to the people and inspiring them to take part in the restoration efforts. While the older generations remained cautious, the youth of Olaris rallied behind her, eager to reclaim their heritage and future. Sarah had always known that technology alone could not save the Olarians; it was their spirit that needed healing. So, she turned her attention to fostering a deeper connection between the humans and Olarians. She arranged cultural exchanges, allowing the two species to learn from one another. The humans shared their history of overcoming adversity, of rebuilding from the ashes of war, while the Olarians taught them their philosophy and scientific principles, which focused on balance, harmony with nature, and the pursuit of knowledge. It was during one of these exchanges that a breakthrough occurred. A group of human scientists, working alongside Olarian engineers, uncovered an ancient device deep within the ruins of Olaris' oldest library. The device was a relic from a time long before the downfall of their civilization, and it contained a piece of technology so advanced that even the humans had never seen anything like it. It was a type of quantum computer, capable of performing calculations and simulations on a scale that could revolutionize not just their world, but the entire galaxy. The discovery of the quantum computer sparked a new wave of excitement. The Olarians began to see that the knowledge they had lost, while irretrievable in many ways, could still be regained through collaboration. The humans, in turn, were awestruck by the complexity of Olarian thought. They realized that, if they could unlock the full potential of the device, they could help the Olarians restore their society in ways they had never imagined. But not everyone was content with this newfound alliance. A faction of Olarian hardliners, still bitter over the years of war and distrust, began to rise against the cooperation. They viewed the humans' growing influence on Olarian affairs as a threat to their independence. Secret meetings were held, and plans to sabotage the humans' efforts were quietly put into motion. The tension between the two factions of Olarian society was palpable, and it became clear that not all of the Olarian people were ready to embrace the future. As tensions mounted, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She could sense the growing hostility and knew that if the situation escalated, it could mean disaster for both civilizations. The human mission was at risk, and without full Olarian support, their efforts could crumble. But Sarah refused to give up. She knew that if she could convince the Olarian people of the value of unity, they might stand a chance. She turned to Lyra for help, knowing that the young Olarian had the influence and determination to bring the divided factions together. Together, they devised a plan to address the rising tensions head-on. They would hold a council of all Olarian factions, where every voice would be heard, and every concern addressed. It would be a delicate negotiation, but Sarah and Lyra were convinced it was the only way to secure the future of Olaris. The council was convened in the heart of the capital city, in the very chamber where the decision to trust the humans had been made. Representatives from every corner of Olaris arrived, some hopeful, others skeptical. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and the fate of both civilizations rested on the outcome. Would the Olarians finally embrace the future, or would they cling to the past, doomed to repeat the mistakes that had brought them to the brink of extinction? The next few hours would decide everything. As the council gathered, the air was thick with tension. Representatives from all walks of Olarian life filled the chamber, their faces a mixture of hope, skepticism, and resentment. Sarah and Lyra stood at the front, ready to speak, but the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. The humans had helped restore vital systems, but now they faced a far more difficult challenge, convincing the Olarian people to unite for their survival. Lyra, with her youthful energy and optimism, stepped forward first. She spoke passionately, her voice echoing through the chamber as she recounted the stories of Olarian greatness and the potential for a future brighter than any their ancestors could have imagined. She spoke of the new discoveries, the technologies that could not only heal their planet but allow them to ascend to heights they had once only dreamed of. But her words did little to sway the hardened members of the council. One by one, they spoke, raising concerns and fears. Many still blamed the ancient wars for Olaris' fall and were fearful of repeating history. They questioned whether humanity could truly be trusted, or if their true motives were merely to exploit the Olarian knowledge for their own gain. The hardliners, in particular, remained unconvinced, their minds already set against the humans. Chancellor Tellin, the oldest and wisest of the Olarian leaders, had remained silent throughout the discussion. He was a figurehead for the traditionalists, a living reminder of the lost Olarian era. But as the debate raged on, he finally spoke, his voice calm but authoritative. "Too much has been lost," Tellin said, his eyes weary with the weight of the years. "We have seen the rise and fall of our civilization. The humans have brought us technology, yes, but at what cost? We are not pawns in some game. Our history cannot be erased, and our future must be ours to choose." Sarah listened intently, knowing the delicate balance they were trying to strike. She stepped forward, her voice steady, but carrying a sense of urgency. "Chancellor Tellin, we are not here to take anything from you. We are offering a partnership, not an empire. The choice is yours, but the opportunity we present is rare. In the galaxy, there are not many chances to rebuild what has been lost. This is your future, and it is still yours to shape." Tellin's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it seemed as though his resolve might soften. But then he turned his gaze to the hardliners who stood with him, their expressions hardened like stone. The division was clear, and Sarah could feel the battle for the Olarian soul unfolding before her eyes. Just as the tension seemed to reach a breaking point, a familiar voice interrupted the stalemate. Lyra spoke again, but this time her words were different, softer, yet filled with a quiet strength. "You all speak of what has been lost," Lyra said, her voice filled with an emotion that transcended the years of war and ruin. "But what about what has not been lost? The knowledge we have left, the people who still stand here today, the potential that still resides within us. Do we let it all fade, or do we rise together and build something worthy of our history?" Her words hung in the air like a beacon, cutting through the layers of doubt and fear that had settled over the council. For a brief moment, the room was silent. Sarah watched as the Olarian leaders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. And then, finally, Tellin spoke again. This time, his voice was softer, almost regretful. "You are right, Lyra. Perhaps we have allowed our fear to blind us. Perhaps we have forgotten what it means to truly live." The room seemed to breathe collectively, the first shift toward unity forming like a fragile thread in a storm. Tellin turned to Sarah. We will accept your help. But know this, humans, we will not be dependent. This is a partnership, not subjugation. We will rebuild, but we will do it on our terms. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and determination. This was not a victory, not yet, but it was a crucial step forward. She looked over at Lyra, who smiled back, her eyes shining with the hope that had sparked the change. The council voted that day, and the decision was unanimous. Humanity would continue to help the Olarians, but the terms were clear: they would work side by side, learning from each other, restoring Olaris without erasing its soul. It was a moment of unprecedented cooperation, a symbol of what could be accomplished when two species put aside their differences and worked toward a shared goal. But the hardliners were not entirely silenced. In the shadows of the council, whispers of rebellion still festered. There were those who believed that the humans had far more to gain from this partnership than the Olarians, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that the balance of power did not tip too far in favor of the newcomers. As the council adjourned, Sarah and Lyra knew that their work had only just begun. The real challenge would come in the days, months, and years ahead. They would have to prove, not just to the Olarian people, but to the universe, that cooperation was the key to survival. If they failed, it wouldn't just be the Olarians who fell, it would be humanity too. The road ahead was uncertain, and the path to salvation would not be easy. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. The Olarians had chosen to fight for their future, and humanity had chosen to stand beside them. Together, they would face whatever came next. The cooperation between the humans and Olarians began in earnest, and while the initial enthusiasm was palpable, the reality of rebuilding a devastated planet soon set in. The first task was to restore the planet's ecosystem, which had been ravaged by centuries of unchecked industrialization, warfare, and environmental collapse. The humans brought their advanced agricultural techniques, which had allowed them to thrive on their own planet, and began to introduce them to the Olarians. It was a painstaking process, one that required patience and careful attention to detail. Together, they cultivated new crops, restored soil quality, and began to heal the planet's wounded landscape. However, this restoration was not without its challenges. The Olarian environment was unlike anything the humans had encountered before, and some of the native flora and fauna proved to be more resilient and aggressive than expected. The Olarians had long lost the knowledge of how to manage these dangers, and many had forgotten the old ways of coexisting with their world. There were occasional setbacks, crops failed, pests ravaged fields, and the human technology that had been introduced to restore balance sometimes malfunctioned, triggering unexpected consequences. Each failure, though disheartening, brought the two species closer together as they learned to adapt to one another's strengths and weaknesses. Lyra, ever the optimist, threw herself into the work. She traveled from village to village, leading efforts to teach the Olarian people how to use the new technologies and techniques. She inspired them not just with her words, but with her actions. It was her unshakable belief that Olaris could be saved that kept the hope alive in the hearts of many. Sarah, while overseeing the larger strategy, found herself relying on Lyra more and more as the young Olarian proved herself to be a natural leader. Yet, as the work progressed, the fissures between the factions of Olarian society became more apparent. Despite the Council's decision to accept the human partnership, there were still many who viewed the collaboration with distrust. The hardliners, though silent after the Council's vote, were not content to watch from the sidelines. They began to work in the shadows, quietly undermining efforts and spreading fear about humanity's true intentions. Sarah and Lyra knew that time was not on their side. As the months passed, the hardliners' influence began to grow. Some Olarian workers sabotaged the agricultural projects, tampered with the restoration machines, and spread rumors that the humans were using Olaris as a testing ground for unknown weapons and technologies. These acts of defiance were small at first, but they grew in scope and frequency, straining the fragile alliance. Sarah, ever vigilant, could not ignore the signs of rebellion brewing beneath the surface. She convened a secret meeting with Lyra and several trusted human and Olarian advisors to discuss the next steps. It was clear that they needed to act swiftly to address the growing unrest before it escalated into full-blown conflict. We can't afford to wait any longer, Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. If we don't find a way to bring the factions together, everything we've done will be for nothing. Lyra nodded, her expression grim. I've been trying to reach out to the hardliners, to speak to them directly. But they've shut me out. They see this as a betrayal. They've forgotten what we've lost, what we've fought for. The more we push for unity, the more they push back. Then we need to show them, Sarah said, her eyes flashing with determination. We need to prove that this alliance is not just about survival, it's about rebuilding something better, something greater than what we had before. But to do that, we need a victory. A symbol that proves we can make this work. A plan began to form, one that was as risky as it was bold. Sarah knew that if they could restore one of the most sacred and revered Olarian monuments, a symbol of their past, it could serve as a rallying point for the divided factions. The monument, known as the Hall of Stars, was a massive structure located in the heart of Olaris' capital city. It had been a place of learning and cultural exchange before the wars, a symbol of the unity and knowledge that once defined their civilization. But during the final years of conflict, the hall had been reduced to a crumbling ruin. If they could restore it, it could become a beacon of hope for all Olarians, showing that the past was not lost, and that the future was still theirs to shape. But the task would be monumental. The Hall of Stars had been damaged beyond recognition, and its technology was deeply entwined with the planet's old systems, systems that had long since broken down. Rebuilding it would require not only human expertise but also the knowledge that the Olarians still possessed, hidden away in the archives and ancient texts they had long abandoned. Lyra immediately understood the significance of the project. If we succeed, it will be more than just a restoration, she said. It will be a message, a new beginning. Sarah and Lyra assembled a team of human and Olarian experts, including engineers, scientists, and historians, and set out to work on the Hall of Stars. The task was grueling, with many obstacles along the way. The ruins of the hall were filled with unstable technology, and the structures surrounding it had deteriorated so much that parts of the building were on the verge of collapse. Even the Olarian technology that remained was difficult to decipher, and many of the old systems no longer functioned as intended. But as the days turned into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. The project brought the divided Olarian factions together. Those who had once distrusted the humans now found themselves working side by side with them. The hardliners, who had once believed in total isolation, saw the restoration as a symbol of what could be accomplished when they worked together. Slowly, but surely, the walls of division began to crumble. After months of relentless effort, the Hall of Stars began to take shape. The once ruined structure was now an awe-inspiring sight, its ancient stonework restored, its holographic archives reactivated, and its once dormant energy systems glowing brightly. The Olarians who had gathered to witness the progress marveled at the result, some even beginning to believe once more that their world could be saved. It was then, as the Hall of Stars was fully restored, that Sarah and Lyra realized something crucial. The victory they had achieved was not just in the rebuilding of a monument, but in the unity they had fostered. The future of Olaris was no longer a question of survival, it was now a question of what they would build together. The restoration of the Hall of Stars became a turning point in the history of Olaris. The once distant dream of rebuilding their world was now a tangible reality. The hall stood as a testament to what could be accomplished through cooperation, a symbol not only of the past but of a new future ere the Olarians and humans could forge a shared destiny. As the grand unveiling of the hall approached, Sarah and Lyra knew that the true test was yet to come. While the physical restoration of the monument had been a success, the real challenge lay in ensuring that the lessons of unity, collaboration, and trust would endure. The Olarians, though inspired by the hall's rebirth, were still divided, and the hardliners were far from silenced. The question that loomed over everything was whether the two species could truly build a future together, or if the fragile peace would shatter the moment the next crisis arose. The day of the unveiling arrived, and thousands of Olarians gathered in the heart of the capital city. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of excitement, pride, and lingering skepticism. The human and Olarian leaders stood together at the foot of the Hall of Stars, as the massive holographic display that adorned the structure flickered to life, showing the history of both species, their triumphs, their failures, and the journey that had led them to this moment. The crowd was silent, captivated by the imagery that stretched across the hall's walls, telling a story of survival, resilience, and hope. Lyra took the stage first. She spoke with all the passion that had carried her through the darkest moments of Alarian history, her voice strong and clear. "Today, we stand together," she said, her words echoing through the square. "We stand as one people, not divided by fear, but united by the possibility of a brighter future. The Hall of Stars is not just a monument to our past, it is a beacon for the future we will build together." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, and for the first time in years, it seemed that the divisions within Olarian society were beginning to fade. Even the hardliners, who had been conspicuously silent throughout the proceedings, could not deny the power of Lyra's message. But there were still those among them who remained unconvinced. They feared that the humans would demand more control, that Olaris' destiny would be dictated by an outside force. The battle for the hearts and minds of the Olarian people was far from over. As Sarah took the stage, the tension in the crowd was palpable. She knew that this moment could either solidify the alliance or drive a wedge between the two species. She spoke with quiet confidence, her words measured yet full of determination. "We did not come here to rule. We came to help," she said, her voice unwavering. "We came to stand beside you, not above you. The future of Olaris is in your hands. We will not abandon you, but we will also not impose our will. The choice is yours. The future is ours to shape together." Sarah's words echoed in the hearts of many, especially the young Olarians who had been inspired by Lyra's vision. Yet, the hardliners remained a powerful force, and as Sarah finished speaking, one of their leaders, Raven, stepped forward. His expression was cold, his tone sharp. "Your words are noble, Captain Whitaker. But your presence here is a reminder of what we lost. The humans may have helped us rebuild, but that does not mean we owe them our future." Raven's challenge was met with a murmur of agreement from his followers, and the crowd's mood shifted slightly. The uneasy silence was broken only by the hum of the hall's displays. Sarah's resolve did not waver, and she met Raven's gaze, her eyes steady. "If you believe that Olaris can thrive in isolation, then I am truly sorry for what you have lost," she said quietly. "But the galaxy is vast. We cannot live in the shadows of the past. We must face the future, together." The tension hung thick in the air, but Lyra, sensing the turning point, stepped forward and stood beside Sarah. The unity between the two women, human and Olarian, was a powerful visual statement that spoke volumes. "The time for division is over," Lyra said, her voice steady and clear. "We may not always agree, but we will always find common ground. Olaris has a chance to heal, but only if we stand united." Slowly, the murmurs of dissent began to quiet, replaced by hesitant applause. The hardliners, though still uneasy, did not escalate the situation further. Raven, though unwilling to publicly concede, stepped back, allowing the momentum of unity to take hold. The unveiling of the Hall of Stars was a success, but it was clear that the journey ahead would not be without obstacles. Over the next few weeks, the cooperation between the humans and Olarians deepened. The hardliners, though still vocal, began to lose influence as the majority of the population saw the benefits of the partnership. The restoration efforts continued to spread across Olaris, from the revitalization of cities to the rebuilding of crucial infrastructure. Sarah and Lyra worked tirelessly, fostering relationships with the Olarian leaders and helping to bridge the gap between those who embraced the future and those who clung to the past. Despite the progress, however, new challenges arose. The Olarian people, once united in their quest for survival, now faced the task of forging a new identity. As they rebuilt their cities and industries, they were confronted with difficult questions. What kind of society did they want to create? What lessons could they learn from the mistakes of their ancestors? The answers were not clear, and the path forward remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. The Hall of Stars stood as a testament to what had been achieved, and it was now up to both the humans and Olarians to ensure that the future they had begun to build would endure. The road ahead was still long, but the foundation had been laid. And in the hearts of Sarah, Lyra, and countless others, the belief that a new era was possible had been rekindled. Olaris was no longer a broken world, it was a world reborn. And with that rebirth came the possibility of something far greater, a lasting partnership between two species, working together for a future they could both call their own. As Olaris continued its slow but steady recovery, the bond between humanity and the Olarian people grew stronger, yet the underlying tensions that had once threatened to tear them apart were far from gone. While the physical restoration of the planet was progressing, the more delicate and complex challenge remained, ensuring the social and cultural integration of the two species. Many Olarians, particularly the younger generation, had begun to embrace the human technologies and methods that were transforming their world. But there were still deep divides, and the fears that had plagued them before the restoration remained. In the months that followed the unveiling of the Hall of Stars, a sense of uneasy optimism spread across the capital city. New buildings rose from the dust and agriculture thrived once more, but the hardliners continued to plot in the shadows. Their suspicions about the humans' true motives had not waned. The Alliance had allowed humanity to gain access to Olarian knowledge, technologies, and resources, opportunities that they feared would be used for something darker than mere assistance. Many whispered that the Olarians were trading their freedom for technological progress, a trade that some were not willing to make. Sarah and Lyra were acutely aware of the growing resistance. In private meetings, Sarah confided in Lyra her worries about the future. "They are still out there, Lyra," Sarah said one evening as they sat together in the council hall, the stars twinkling through the vast windows. "The hardliners are planning something. They want to turn the people against us again. I can feel it." Lyra's expression was grim but resolute. "I know. I've heard the rumors. The seeds of rebellion are being sown. But we have made so much progress. They can't take that away from us, not without a fight." Sarah nodded, but her mind was racing. They had worked too hard, come too far, for everything to collapse now. The alliances they had forged with the Olarian leaders were tenuous at best. Even though the majority of the population had come to see the benefit of working with the humans, there were still too many who clung to the idea that Olaris could be rebuilt on their own, without foreign influence. The humans, for their part, were growing restless. They had made tremendous strides in helping the Olarians rebuild, but they were starting to feel the limitations of their role. Many of the human settlers on Olaris had begun to question whether they were simply being used as tools for the Olarian restoration effort. They had come to Olaris with the promise of a new beginning, but now it seemed that they were being kept in the background, their contributions not fully acknowledged by the Olarian people. One particularly vocal faction of human settlers, led by Captain Darrow, began to push for a more assertive stance. They argued that humanity's involvement should go beyond mere assistance, that it was time for the humans to claim a more prominent role in Olarian society. "We are not just here to fix your planet, we're here to help you build a new future. If the Olarians can't see that, then maybe it's time we step forward and demand our place," Darrow had said at a recent gathering of human leaders. This sentiment was echoed by several influential voices within the human community, and Sarah found herself torn. She knew the humans had a right to be heard, but she also knew that pushing too hard could jeopardize everything they had worked for. The Olarians were still fragile, and their mistrust of humanity ran deep. If the humans overstepped, it could push the entire alliance to the brink. Meanwhile, Lyra continued her efforts to unite the Olarian people. She worked tirelessly to visit the various factions across Olaris, speaking to the disillusioned, the frightened, and the angry. She became a symbol of hope for many, a figure that embodied the potential of what humanity and Olarian society could achieve together. But even Lyra, with all her charisma and conviction, was finding it increasingly difficult to sway the hardliners. One evening, as she and Sarah sat together discussing the latest developments, Lyra's face hardened. "It's getting worse, Sarah. They're organizing. They've called for a vote among the council to decide whether we should expel the human presence from Olaris entirely." The words hit Sarah like a blow. She had known it was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made the threat all too real. "Do you think they'll win?" she asked quietly. Lyra's eyes were unwavering. "I don't know. But I do know that if the council votes to expel the humans, it could ignite a civil war. The people are divided. The ones who have seen the benefits of the alliance will never go back to the old ways. But the hardliners, they're not just going to let this go." Sarah stood, pacing as she thought through their options. "We can't let it come to that. We've come too far." Lyra stood as well, her gaze fixed on the horizon outside the window. "We need to find a way to convince them that this alliance is the only way forward. If we don't, we risk losing everything." The situation had reached a tipping point. A final decision was looming, one that would decide the fate of Alaris and its relationship with humanity. A secret meeting was called between the council leaders and the human representatives. It would be a delicate negotiation, a chance for both sides to air their grievances and attempt to find a middle ground. At the meeting, Sarah and Lyra stood side by side, presenting their case to the Olarian leaders. "This is not about dominance," Sarah said firmly. "This is about survival. The alliance we've forged has saved countless lives. We've given you the tools to restore your world. We are not here to take over, we are here to help you stand on your own 2 feet. Raven, still a prominent voice among the hardliners, stood up to speak. "You say you are here to help us, but you fail to understand that we have lost everything. Our people are broken. Your presence, however well-meaning, is a reminder of what we lost. We cannot allow you to dictate our future." Lyra's voice was calm but powerful. "The future isn't about dictating. It's about choosing together. We've all lost so much, humans and Olarians alike. But we can either rebuild what we were, or we can forge something new. The choice is yours." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled in. The tension was palpable, and the decision hung in the balance. Sarah knew that the fate of Alaris, and the future of the Human-Olarian alliance, depended on what happened next. It was then that Chancellor Tellin, who had remained quiet throughout most of the proceedings, stood. His voice, though weak, carried the wisdom of a long life. "I have lived through the rise and fall of civilizations. I have seen hope crushed by fear and distrust. But I also know this: we cannot survive alone. If we do not accept the help of our allies, we will fall. Olaris will remain a fractured world, divided and lost." The room went quiet. Tellin's words held a weight that no one could ignore. It was a turning point, a moment where the future of Olaris would be decided, not by force, but by the recognition of what was at stake. The vote was cast that evening, and the decision was final. The alliance would remain, but it would be redefined. The Olarians would no longer live in the shadow of their past, and the humans would no longer act as mere benefactors. They would work together, equally, with a shared vision of the future. And so, with the weight of the decision behind them, Sarah and Lyra knew that the true rebuilding of Alaris had just begun. It would not be an easy road, but it was a road that they would walk together. The future of both species was now intertwined, bound by a shared hope that had once seemed impossible. The struggle was far from over, but in that moment, it felt like they had taken the first step towards something far greater than either could have imagined alone. The following months brought both visible and subtle shifts on Alaris, and the impact of the alliance between humanity and the Olarian people was now a part of the planet's very fabric. It was no longer a question of survival, the question now was how they would thrive together, how they would weave a new world from the ruins of the old. The road to true peace was not simple, and the remnants of resistance still simmered beneath the surface, but the foundations for lasting cooperation had been laid. Lyra and Sarah, though weary, were determined to continue their work. They had grown close over the past year, their bond unshakable despite the weight of their roles. But even with their tireless efforts, the tension between the two peoples still existed, more like a quiet storm that could break at any moment. One of the biggest challenges was establishing a fair and just government that represented both human and Olarian interests. The Council, once a group divided between factions, had begun to function as a more cohesive body, though it was not without its struggles. Raven, who had been largely quiet since the demonstration, had rallied his supporters for one last attempt to disrupt the delicate peace. A growing faction of hardliners, calling themselves the New Dawn, had started pushing for a complete severance of human involvement in Olaris' political structure. Raven's call for secession was a powerful one. "This is Olaris' moment," he declared in a public speech. "We must not allow ourselves to be governed by those who do not know our true way. We can rebuild, but only if we stand on our own feet. The humans' help was necessary, but we have paid the price. It's time to stand free." The speech hit like a bombshell across the planet. Old wounds opened up, and the fear of cultural erasure returned. Lyra and Sarah knew they had to act quickly. The old wounds of war were still fresh, and though much had been done to repair the physical world, the psychological scars had not yet healed. Humanity's role in the planet's recovery was still questioned, but it was undeniable that without their help, Olaris would never have risen from the ashes. The council convened again, tensions high. The voices in favor of the New Dawn movement were growing louder, and as Raven's faction gained traction, so too did the push for a new way forward. Sarah had expected this moment to come, but it had come too soon. She had hoped that the political stability they had fought so hard to establish would be enough to weather this storm. But in a world so fractured by years of war, the wounds of the past were never far from the surface. In the council chambers, emotions ran high. "We cannot let this division tear us apart," Lyra said passionately, standing before the assembled leaders. "We all agreed, human and Olarian alike, that we would rebuild together. We promised our people that the mistakes of the past would not dictate our future. The path forward is not easy, but it is the only path that ensures Olaris' survival. If we tear ourselves apart now, we will fall back into the chaos we fought so hard to escape." Raven stood before the council, his face tense with anger. "The chaos we fought so hard to escape was born from your interference. We were fine before you arrived. We did not need your help to survive. We needed our sovereignty. I will not let you take that from us." Sarah's voice rang out firmly. "You speak of sovereignty, but what is sovereignty if it leads to destruction? What is freedom if it costs us everything we've worked for? The humans didn't come here to rule, we came here to help. We came here to give you the tools you needed to rebuild. We came here because we knew that together, we could create a future that neither of us could have done alone." The room fell into a heavy silence. It was clear that a decisive moment had arrived, one that would determine the future of Olaris. There could be no more half measures. No more compromises. They had to choose, and their choice would echo through the generations. A vote was called, and Sarah and Lyra stood in quiet anticipation, awaiting the decision that would determine the future of the planet. Raven's supporters called for a return to Olarian independence, while those who had embraced the alliance argued for unity and continued collaboration. In the end, the vote was closer than either side had expected, but it was the voice of reason that carried the day. The majority of the council chose to maintain the alliance, with certain compromises made to address the concerns of the Olarian population. There would be more representation for Olarian voices in government, and a new structure for governance would be created to ensure that both human and Olarian citizens had an equal say in the future of the planet. The decision was not a perfect one, and it did not come without its sacrifices. Many Olarian citizens still felt that the humans had too much influence, while some humans felt they had been denied the recognition they deserved for their role in Olaris' recovery. But for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of cautious hope. The decision did not end the divisions on Olaris, but it was the beginning of a new chapter. Over the coming years, the alliance would be tested again and again. But as Sarah and Lyra stood side by side on the balcony of the newly rebuilt council hall, looking out at the city below, they knew that they had made the right choice. The path forward would not be easy, and the wounds of the past would continue to haunt them, but there was something undeniable in the air, a sense of possibility, a shared determination to overcome the challenges ahead. For the first time in generations, Olaris had hope. And with that hope, the two species, bound by a common struggle and a shared future, were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The alliance was not perfect, but it was a beginning that would shape the future of Alaris for centuries to come. And so, with the stars above them and the future before them, they took their first steps toward that future, together.